Whispers of Stillness. A Zen sleep story. Settle comfortably where you are. Take a deep breath, and let the weight of the day begin to lift from your shoulders. Tonight, I'll share 3 stories with you, each one touching an ancient truth about life's natural flow and inner peace. There's no hurry. Just listen and breathe. Part 1. The Secret of the Stone Garden. In a valley between mountains, often wrapped in morning mist, there stood a small monastery that had weathered centuries. Here, you would wake to birdsong and end each day with the soft resonance of temple bells. In this monastery lived a young monk named Keiko. She had been there for 10 years, performing the same duties each day. Sweeping the garden, preparing meals, sitting in meditation. But lately, a restlessness had begun growing inside her. Keiko found herself constantly comparing. The head monk Tenshin's deep wisdom, young monk Hiro's natural stillness, old Fumiko's endless patience. Everyone seemed to excel at something. But what about her? What was she good at? Every morning as she raked the stone garden, her mind filled with these thoughts. Even as she drew the rake through the gravel between the stones, she asked herself, "Am I doing this well enough? Would others do it better?" One autumn morning, she began raking the stone garden as usual. The air was cool. Leaves were falling slowly. But Keiko noticed none of this. Her mind was occupied, thinking about how still Hiro had sat during last night's meditation. Keiko had struggled with itches, aches, discomfort. Just then, Tenshin appeared at the garden's edge. The old master stood quietly, watching Keiko. "The garden looks beautiful," Tenshin said softly. Keiko stopped, bowing slightly. "Thank you, master. But I know I could do better. Perhaps more regular lines, or cleaner patterns." Tenshin smiled. "Tell me what you see. Right now, in this garden, what do you see?" Keiko looked around. Stones, neat lines in the gravel, falling leaves. "I see a stone garden," she said, slightly confused. "Only that? Tell me, did you notice how the morning light falls on the stones? Did you smell the fresh scent of the rake's path through the gravel? Did you see how the wind carries the leaves?" Keiko paused. Actually, she had noticed none of these things. While raking, her mind was elsewhere. On Hiro's meditation, on Fumiko's patience, on her own inadequacies. "I see," said Tenshin gently, "that your hands rake the garden, but your mind is somewhere else. Every morning you stand here, but you've never truly been here." Keiko lowered her head in shame. "You're right, master. I'm constantly thinking about others, whether I'm as good as them." Tenshin sat beside a stone, gesturing for Keiko to join him. "Let me tell you something. Years ago, there was a young monk here, like you. His name was Daichi. He also constantly compared himself to others. 'Why isn't my meditation as deep?' he would ask. 'Why isn't my calligraphy as elegant?' One day, I asked him, 'Did you notice that you breathed this morning?' He was surprised. 'Of course I breathe,' he said. 'But did you notice?' I asked again. 'The air entering your nose, your lungs expanding, the breath slowly releasing.' He stopped and thought, then said no. So I told him, 'You're living without even noticing the most fundamental fact of your existence, because your mind is always elsewhere, busy comparing, busy judging.' Tenshin picked up a leaf from the ground. 'Look at this leaf. Do you think it wonders whether it's more beautiful or uglier than other leaves? It falls as it should fall, simply. Exactly as it is.' Keiko looked at the leaf. Its edges were curled, its color faded, but it had a strange beauty. 'You are the same,' said Tenshin. 'You are exactly as you should be. But you can't see this because you're constantly trying to be something else. Like Hiro, like Fumiko, like me. But have you ever tried being like Keiko?' Something shifted in Keiko that day. Not immediately, but slowly. The next morning, when she began raking the garden, she noticed her mind starting to compare again. But this time she stopped. She breathed. And she truly looked, at the morning light, at the stones, at the traces the rake left in the gravel. For the first time, she felt completely there. Weeks passed. Keiko still noticed when comparison thoughts arose, but now she didn't get caught in them. "Ah, there it is again," she would say gently, and bring her attention back to the present, to the smell of food while cooking, to her breath while meditating, to the feeling of her feet on the ground while walking. One evening, Tenshin said to her, "Have you noticed? You seem more peaceful lately." Keiko smiled. "I think I've stopped trying to be different from who I am. And strangely, this feels more real." "Because," said Tenshin, "for the first time, you're living your own life. Trying to live someone else's life is exhausting. Living your own life, that's as natural as breathing." From that night on, each time Keiko swept the stone garden, she would notice something different. Sometimes an insect walking between the lines, sometimes the waves the wind created in the gravel, sometimes just the movement of her own hands. And these were enough, because these were real. Take a deep breath. Notice, right now you're breathing, not someone else, you. And this, just as it is enough. Part 2. The Wisdom of Broken Bowls. In a coastal town famous for centuries of pottery making, there was a workshop where a master named Michiko worked. She lived in a small house with her family, and in one corner of that house stood a shelf displaying her carefully crafted porcelain pieces. On this shelf sat a special bowl, blue-green tones, decorated with delicate lines, a gift from her teacher 10 years ago. Michiko kept it not for drinking tea, but just for looking. That bowl represented her teacher, everything she'd learned, the past itself. One summer day, her daughter Yuki brought friends home. As the children ran around joyfully, one accidentally bumped the shelf. The bowl slid slowly forward and fell to the floor. A crystalline sound, then silence. Michiko rushed from the kitchen. She saw the pieces on the floor. She saw her daughter's frozen face. Her first feeling was anger. That bowl was irreplaceable. That bowl came from her teacher. Then deep sadness. The object that reminded her of her teacher every day was gone. But then, something strange happened. Michiko knelt on the floor, gathering the pieces. As she held them, she thought about how the bowl had sat there for years. She had never touched it, because she was afraid it might break. And now it was broken, and the world kept turning. "I'm sorry, Mother," said Yuki, eyes filled with tears. Michiko looked at her daughter, then at the pieces. "You know," she said slowly, "this bowl sat there for 10 years, and I valued it so much that I was afraid to use it. By trying to protect it, I actually denied myself the joy of it." She showed one piece to her daughter. "Look, here I can see my teacher's fingerprint. I'm noticing it now. For 10 years I looked but never really saw." That evening, Michiko placed the pieces in a box, but she didn't throw them away. A few days later, she began joining the pieces with special glue and gold powder. The Japanese art called kintsugi, honoring breaks by highlighting them with gold rather than hiding them. The process took weeks. Each evening after finishing her work, she would work on this bowl. As she carefully joined the pieces, brushing gold dust along each crack line, she was learning something. Breaking wasn't actually an ending. It was a transformation. When the bowl was finished, it was more beautiful than before. The golden lines turned what had once been invisible breaks into its most striking feature. The bowl told a story. It fell, it broke, but it didn't disappear. It transformed. Michiko didn't put the bowl back on the shelf. She placed it in the kitchen and began using it every day. She drank her morning tea from this bowl. And each time she did, she would see the golden lines of the breaks and smile. One day Yuki said, "Mother, why do you use it? It could break again." Michiko stroked her daughter's hair. "Everything can break, sweetheart. Everything changes and passes. But we don't stop loving things because of that. We just try to hold them tighter. But real love is open-handed. It says, 'I'm grateful for the time I have with you.' Not, 'I expect you to stay forever.'" Yuki thought about this. "What about people? They also change and leave, don't they?" "Yes," said Michiko. "And that actually makes it more special. When my teacher died, I was very sad. But now I understand. Everything he gave me is here, in me. In these hands, in this knowledge, in the way I see clay. He didn't disappear. He changed form, like this bowl." Years later, when Yuki became a potter herself, she would remember that broken bowl. And she would tell her own students, "Don't be afraid of breaking. Sometimes breaking is how we become more beautiful. The cracks, when filled with gold, become the most precious part. Let your breath slow down. Notice how something broken can become something new. Notice how change, even painful change, carries its own kind of beauty." Part 3. The Potter Who Stopped Striving. In the same coastal town, there lived another potter named Soto. He was known throughout the region for his skill, but also for something else, his constant dissatisfaction. Soto would create a beautiful vase, then immediately see only its flaws. He would make an elegant tea set, then compare it unfavorably to work he'd seen in the capital. No matter what he created, it was never quite good enough. He attended every workshop available. He studied with famous masters. He worked late into the night, trying new techniques, attempting to achieve perfection. His wife worried as she watched him grow thinner, more exhausted, more frustrated. "Why are you pushing yourself so hard?" she would ask. "Because I need to be better," he would reply. "There's so much I haven't mastered yet." One winter, Soto fell ill. Nothing serious, but enough that he couldn't work for several weeks. He was confined to his bed, too weak even to sketch designs. At first, this felt like torture. All that time wasted. He should be practicing, improving, working. But he had no choice. He could only lie there and rest. From his bed, he could see his small workshop through the window. On the shelf sat pieces he had made over the years. In his enforced stillness, he found himself just looking at them. There was a simple cup he'd made 5 years ago, early in his career. He remembered being somewhat proud of it at the time, then later dismissing it as crude, unsophisticated. But looking at it now, with nothing else to do, he saw something different. The cup had an honesty to it, a directness. Yes, the glaze was uneven in places, and the form wasn't perfectly symmetrical. But there was life in it somehow. A quality his later, more technically perfect pieces sometimes lacked. He thought about all the years he'd spent striving, pushing, trying to become a better potter. Had it made him happier? Had it made his work more alive? One morning, his wife brought him tea in that old cup. As he held it, feeling its weight, its slight asymmetry, he realized something. He had been so busy trying to create perfect pottery that he'd forgotten why he started making pottery in the first place. It wasn't to be the best potter or to achieve some ideal. It was because he loved the feel of clay in his hands, the simple pleasure of making something useful. When had he lost that? When Soto recovered and returned to his workshop, he did something unusual. Instead of immediately launching into new ambitious projects, he decided to spend a month making only the simplest pieces. Basic bowls and cups, nothing fancy. And he would try to make them the way he used to, for the simple joy of it, without constantly evaluating whether they were good enough. The first week was difficult. His mind kept criticizing. These pieces were too simple, too basic. He should be challenging himself, pushing his limits, improving his skills. But he stayed with the practice. By the second week, something began to soften. He found himself enjoying the work again. The feel of clay centering on the wheel, the way water helped his hands shape the form, the smell of earth. These simple pleasures had been there all along, but he'd been too focused on achieving to notice them. He made dozens of simple bowls. Some turned out well, some didn't. But he found he cared less about the results. The pleasure was in the making itself. And interestingly, without trying so hard, his work began to have a quality it had lacked during his period of intense striving. An ease, a simplicity that came from not forcing. One day, a merchant who had bought Soto's work for years came to visit. He examined the new simple pieces with surprise. "Something has changed in your work," the merchant said. "It's still clearly yours, but there's a quality it didn't have before. Less perfection perhaps, but more life." Soto understood what he meant. "I stopped trying so hard," he said simply. "I remembered that I'm already a potter. That was always enough." The merchant picked up one of the simple bowls, turning it in his hands. "You know, I've sold your work for years. The technically perfect pieces were impressive. But these pieces have warmth. They feel like they were made by someone who was actually present while making them." Years passed. Soto continued to develop his skills, continued to learn and grow. But the desperate quality was gone. He wasn't running towards some imagined version of himself that would finally be acceptable. He was simply working with clay, day by day, finding satisfaction in the work itself, rather than in some future achievement. When younger potters would come to study with him, pushing themselves too hard, criticizing their work harshly, he would tell them about his illness, about the month he spent just looking at his old work, about what he learned by stopping. "Skill is important," he would say, "but it's not everything. If you're so busy striving to be better that you can't enjoy what you're doing right now, then what's the point? You'll spend your whole life running towards some future moment when you'll finally be good enough. And that moment never comes." He would pick up one of his simple bowls. "This bowl is not perfect. I could point out 10 flaws in it, but I made it with my own hands, with attention and care. And it holds tea perfectly. For me, right now, that's enough." One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Soto sat in his workshop with a cup of tea. The day's work was done. Several simple pieces sat on the shelf, drying. He thought about all the years he'd spent exhausting himself, trying to become something more than he was. And he thought about now, about this quiet satisfaction of having spent a day doing work he loved, without the constant pressure to be better. His wife came to sit with him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. "You seem peaceful," she said after a while. "I am," he replied. "I finally learned something important. I was already enough. I always was. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy looking ahead at who I thought I should become. And now I'm here. Just this potter, making this pottery in this moment. And it's enough. It was always enough. As you rest tonight, feel your breath moving gently in and out. You don't have to make it better. You don't have to try harder. Right now, just as you are, breathing just as you're breathing, you are enough. You've always been enough. Let yourself simply be. The 3 stories are complete. The monk who learned to be present. The bowl that became more beautiful through breaking. The potter who found peace in stopping the endless striving. Each story whispers the same truth. What you're seeking isn't far away. It's here, now, in this moment. In the simple fact of being alive, breathing, existing. Let your body sink deeper into rest. Let the day's concerns drift away like leaves on water. You don't need to become anything other than what you are. Just this breath. Just this moment. Just this peaceful settling into sleep. Rest well.